We're going to try something new this week on the Online Zone. We asked high-stakes cash game player Dani Ansky Stern to submit some hand histories for some hands that he thought he played well and some that he thought he played poorly. We're going to go over some of those hands with him today, street for street, to get an inside track on the way that he plays. Keep in mind that Ansky is an instructor for Card Player Pro, a poker video training site powered by Poker Savvy Plus. You can check out detailed hand analysis from him and other Card Player Pro instructors as they play tournaments and cash games in pretty much any poker discipline imaginable. Now there's a 7-day free trial available for Card Player Pro at cardplayer.com/pro. Now let's get to Ansky and those hands. All right, so thank you very much for being here with us today, Danny.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so first off, you sent me a few hands here, and you sent me one that you said you had played badly, so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't start off with that. You want to go ahead and talk viewers through the pre-flop action in this hand?
Yeah, I was playing heads up against a guy, and we both had about 4K in our stacks. We're playing 10-20, so it's fairly deep. And I think I've been running him over pretty well, and he'd been playing kind of passive post flop and a bit weak tight. So I was calling with a lot more hands in the big blind than I normally would when he's raising. Also because he's raising every single button that's part of his heads up strategy, and which a lot of players employ, which I don't, but I think it has a lot of merit to it in some ways. So he raised 60, and I called another 40 with 7-8 offsuit, which is, in my opinion, normally a bit of a mistake. But like I said, I've been calling with a lot more hands that I don't normally call with. So I made the decision to call there, 7-8 offsuit.
Okay, and well, I mean, and 7-8, any kind of connectors usually aren't you usually pretty safe calling in a heads up situation? Because you're saying it's not that big of a mistake, but could it really be a mistake at all in heads up? Aren't you supposed to be playing a vast majority of your hands?
I generally think you should not be playing a vast majority of your hands from the big blind. I mean, it's a common misconception that people say, because you're playing heads up, you should be playing lots of hands. When you're in the big blind, you should be playing no more than like a quarter of your hands, really.
Okay.
And although if he's raising a lot of buttons, you can open up and play more than you usually would. But you should be playing very safe from the big blind. It's pretty, when you think about it, anyway, you think about it, there's just no way you want to be giving into tons of pots out of position. You'd much rather just keep it a pretty tight and simple game. In regards to just, calling weak hands in the big blind, you'd rather just throw them away and focus on playing your button, because you're not going to be making, it's going to be very, very hard to outplay somebody, even if they're significantly worse than you, from the big blind.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get to the flop then.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the flop came king of clubs, 8 of clubs, and 5 of hearts. And I had an offsuit 7-8. And I checked and he checks. I mean, I don't know how much we can discuss about this. It's pretty standard.
Well,
for me to just check there out of position. I mean, I could lead. Some people like leading a lot of hands out of the big blind. And I do usually, although this session I remember I hadn't been leading very much. And really when you lead, you need to have, it's one of those types of plays where you need to have you really need to have a plan surrounding it. You can't just throw out a bet without really understanding why you're doing it. So you're going to be doing it only if you think you're inducing a bluff raise, or if you think you'll somehow be able to play perfect to a raise. If you raise, you'll know exactly what to do. So to just basically bet there without a plan is kind of just doesn't really make much sense.
But you don't think that betting out there to get any kind of conception at all of what kind of hand he might be holding has any advantage here?
I mean, yeah, you can always say you're betting for information or something, but betting for information is usually a mistake, because you're best off in this situation is checking and waiting and see what he does. Because truthfully, when you check, he's going to be betting most of the time. You can call that profitably because you're fair. And it's a heads-up match. You're expecting him to see that with almost his entire range of hands, which makes it profitable for you to check call with any pair, really, especially on the middle pair. But of course, he sometimes is going to check behind, which is bad for you if he has like 2 overcards or something like that, and he gets a free card. That's just sort of part of the risk that you have to take when you know for a fact you have a profitable option to check call. Whereas if you lead, you don't know exactly how profitable it's going to be. You don't know exactly how he's going to be playing towards it. When you're much more used to reacting to just him betting, you calling, basically.
Okay, I see. So the action here goes check, check, and then the turn brings out the 8 of spades.
Yeah, so it gives me trips, which improves my hand, but not necessarily. And
Why do you say that?
What's that?
Why do you say that? Why do you say it doesn't necessarily improve your hand?
Well, I mean, the chances that he's checking, I mean, he chance that he's checking a hand better than an 8 on the flop, pretty slim. Most players would bet. I mean, he could be checking something like 9s, 10s, jacks, queens. But then again, I think if I'm in his on those hands, I'd probably bet because I would expect my opponent to call with a lot of weaker hands. And sometimes the bluff raising a good spot to bet the flop with anything that beats middle pair there pretty much. So when you think about it that way, if he can't have those slightly better hands than me on the flop, that means that my hand didn't actually improve on the turn. Technically, it improved in raw hand strength, but that's pretty much irrelevant when you actually know anything about it. I know one hole it's all about relative hand strength. So actually, that improved from here to trips. It's not that important in this situation.
And in fact, is it possibly even a hindrance because now it's slightly harder, at least psychologically, to get away from the hand?
I mean, I don't know about. I mean, I'm not really ever looking to get away from trips in a heads-up match, but it's more about just in this situation. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say it that way. Knowing the results, but it makes it harder to get away from. But in truth, I mean, the way I played the hand was just absolutely terrible because I decided to check raise the turn, which really makes no sense when you think about it. Because if he had decided to check behind any sort of marginal strength hand on the flop, then he's going to check it again on the turn most likely. So when I check raise the turn, it makes it look much more like, I mean, I'm only going to, I mean, his range basically there is just like pretty strong hands, which beat me in bluffs, I think. And check raising is honestly not better against the bluff. I'd much rather bet there and let him try and bluff raise me, and then I can call and check call the river, or even bet there and let him raise me and then make it a really tough decision on the river. If I check and he bets, I mean, I would never say that that it would be a hindrance because it makes it harder to get away from. I'd like to think I can get away from any hand in any situation if the situation calls for it. Like I said, it's all about relative hand strength, so it's not the fact that I have trips that would make it harder to get away from. It would just be the situation and how the hand had been going.
Okay. And so, like you said, you ended up check raising him here, and the betting just kept going back and forth, raise, re-raise until you were both all in.
Yeah. I mean, I think and when I check raise, the whole idea behind it, if at the time, if I make the decision to check raise, because I think he'll think I'm bluffing a lot, which means I think he'll try to re-bluff me at least some percentage of the time. Now, in reality, I sort of overestimated it in this regard. I didn't think, I thought at the time maybe he might be crazy enough to try some crazy 4-bet or 5-bet bluff. But it was pretty bad judgment on my part, I think, against a specific player. Only because it's a specific player, though. So I mean, he bet 100, I made it 400, and then he made it 1,100. And then I decided that since I wasn't going to fold, basically the decision I made at this point, this is similar to other hands that we're talking about. But at this point, when I decide to, when he 3-bets me on the flop, on the turn, when it's on a king 8-5 board, basically I have to decide. I have one of 3 options. I can call now and call the river, which he will inevitably shove, or occasionally might check behind, or I can call now and fold the river if I think he would never follow up with his bluff on the river, or I can do what I did, which is make a really small raise on the turn to hopefully try to induce a bluff from him. And basically what you want to do is if you've ruled out the decision that you're not going to fold in the river no matter what, then you basically have to weigh what is more likely. It's more likely that if you call now, will he bluff the river, or if you make a small raise now, will he bluff the turn? Which one is more likely? And I thought at the time it would be slightly more likely for him to re-bluff the turn if I made a really small raise. And a really small re-raise, I guess it's just called.
Right.
And in retrospect, I probably could have just called his re-raise, his re-raise to 1,100, and then check folded the river, because I think it would really look like I had trips when I did that, and no one in their right mind was trying to bluff someone off of trips on such a dry board on the river. So I could basically call there and then make a decision to fold on the river if he bet, or hopefully he would check behind with his if he was bluffing, he would give up.
Okay. And so, I mean, obviously the result of the hand, like I said, you all got all in, and he had Queen 8 for a better kicker than you, basically, and the river blanked out, so. So in a perfect world, you would have rather called the re-raise on the turn and check folded the river when you let out. Or I'm sorry, check folded the river when he bet.
Check fold basically if he bombed the river. It's very. It's very hard to say with hindsight. I should have folded. I should have been fold because I know what he had.
Right.
But really, like looking back at the match, looking back at the decisions. I started playing against him much better. I think as the match went on. Because I just got to see more and more of his hands on how he was playing. I think I adjusted better, and early on I wasn't playing as well, so I didn't quite realize that I could take that line where I just call and fold the river. That was basically it.
Okay. The next hand that I have here, you're at it looks like a 6-handed table, and you have aces. It's pretty hard not to play aces well, but then again, the real point with aces is usually to try to maximize your profits. So, how did you do that in this hand?
Yeah, I'm playing as a player who I've played with for a long time, for basically 2 years. We've been playing with each other on and off. So we both know each other's game pretty well. I know his game well. And he raises second stack to 70, and I make it 240 with aces right behind him. We're both pretty deep. Actually, I probably should have made it slightly bigger pre-flop. I'm not sure why I only made it 240. But it falls back to him, and he calls. And I pretty much expect him to call, a huge percentage of the time there because we're so deep, and he thinks if he can find a big hand, he might be able to stack me if I have a slightly worse hand.
Well,
which is kind of, he's going to call hands like suited connectors and pocket pairs. He finds hands like ace-jack and such, but he'll call with suited aces. He'll probably call with suited connectors and any pocket pair for sure.
Okay. And you said that you raised to 3 times his raise, which was already 3 times the big blind. So you raised a pretty decent amount, but you were saying that you don't even think that was necessarily enough. Why do you say that? What's going through your head when you say that you think that maybe you should have raised more?
I raised more than 3x. He made it 70, and I made it 240.
240, I'm sorry.
I made a little bit more than 3 times his raise. But the reason mainly is that we were so deep stacked that, when you're deeper, you have to make the re-raise sizes a bit bigger. The obvious reason is just that it cuts down their implied odds. It makes it harder for them to profitably call the wide range hand. But the thing is, when you're in position, I think that concept is sort of diminished and not nearly as important. Basically, because even though their implied odds are already going to be cut down by the fact that they're out of position, and it's going to be harder for them to outplay you or stack you when they have a big hand. You can play pot control much easier with your marginal strength hands, things like that. So I'm not saying I dislike my re-raise. I'm just basically saying I think that re-raising a little bit more is also an option, sort of to cut down on the reverse implied odds for yourself and his implied odds.
Okay. So like you said, you raised to 240 and he ended up calling, and then the flop came down ace 3-4 rainbow. So you had flopped set.
Yeah. He checked, and I bet 400, which is really the only option here. I suppose I could check behind, but I really don't like that. I think against a really aggressive player, especially a really aggressive European player who likes to bluff in spots where it's really hard for them to get re-bluffed. It's like if he decides to check raise here on a bluff, he can't really expect me to be crazy enough to just shove it in on a 3-bet bluff. Maybe I would, but it would be a very difficult play to do. So it's going to be a good spot for him to check raise bluff me basically, because he wouldn't expect me to really react in a crazy way to it. And also by betting the flop, he knows if I had some sort of bluffing hand, if I had re-raised him with just some garbage pre-flop, and he checked that flop, the ace-high flop, I would bet 100% of the time on a bluff. And he knows that. Whereas if I check behind, my hand kind of looks like jacks, queens, kings, and then he's going to basically shut down because he's going to think that I would probably just call down with those hands. So he's not really actually going to give me more action. So the only merit to checking behind the flop would be hoping that he gets his set, which is a 2-outer, basically, hoping that he has pocket sevens or something and offsuit 7 turns. But I think betting is just in general a better play here. So he checks, and I bet 400 into a pot for about 500 or so.
Right.
And he check raised me to 1040, which is sort of what I was expecting him to do a good percentage of the time. And this is another hand that sort of relates to the concept I was talking about before. Now, basically, because he check raised me, I know that his range right now is exactly like 2 pair and sets and bluffs. That's it. That's all he can have. He can't have like ace jack here and be raising like to see where he's at or something. It makes no sense for him to do that because he knows I would call with all my better hands, or at least put more money in my better hands, and fold all my worst hands. So basically, and because I have 2 of the aces already, I'd say it's extremely likely that he has a bluff here. And so I have to sort of decide how to best maximize my value, knowing that he has a bluff. And that's what it comes down to. When I made the decision after that, I re-raised him to 1,800, which is like almost a min raise, basically. And this is sort of the same thing that I was talking about before, is that when you know that they're so suppose I know that his range is what I said it is, and I really do think that is exactly his range. It doesn't matter what I do if he has any of those big hands. If he has 2 pair, if he has a set, it's a dry board. If I flat call, he's going to get it in. If I 3-bet, he's going to get it in. It doesn't matter. He's going to get it in no matter what. So basically, what I have to do is try to maximize against a part of his range that won't necessarily do the same thing whether I call or whether I 3-bet. And I think that if I call his check raise, he's going to have to shut down on a lot of his bluffs because there's very few hands he can represent on the turn. And it also, my hand looks extremely strong. He's going to know I have ace, queen, ace, king, something like that, or even stronger when I call his check raise. So he's going to shut down a lot. So basically, I have to decide if I think he will, he's not going to expect me to free bluff that flop. I mean, or to 3-bet that flop for value, because he's going to think, why would he expect me to make a raise there with ace, king, or ace, queen? It's just it's not a weak hand, not a very strong hand in that situation to be making some like minimum 3-bet, Mm-hmm. So I think it kind of looks really fishy. It looks like I'm bluffing. So I decided to make it 1,800, and it pretty much worked to perfection. He shoved, and I called off the extra 2,800, and he had pocket deuces for a gut shot.
And which is basically he's playing it like a bluff at that point. So
yeah, I mean it's just a total bluff. I mean it's semi bluff technically, but it's just
yeah.
Bluff.
Well, and also that brings up a good point in the middle of the hand where you're talking about how you bet he raised and then you re-raised. That re-raise amount is very important, and that's when like the stack sizes come into play and everything like that, especially if you're putting him on a bluff, because you need to figure out the exact right amount to be able to re-raise so that he thinks that he still has some fold equity in his shove, right? So how do you go about figuring out the perfect amount to re-raise?
Well, when you're deciding the amount to re-raise, especially when you're sort of trapping someone like that, you basically have to think, if I were bluffing, what's the least amount that I could bluff with that would still look credible? Because if I were bluffing there, there's no reason to like shove or something. It's too excessive in his mind. So he thinks if I was bluffing, I would do exactly what I did. I would make it like 2,000, 1,800 or something like that. Because nobody really I wouldn't be expecting him to. I mean, he wouldn't expect me to expect him to make a ridiculous 4-bet bluff there in a re-raised pot.
Right.
It's really what it comes down to. So, because I don't think he would expect me to do that, or I should say, this is just going back and forth at different levels, because I really don't expect, like I said, I'm confusing myself already. Basically, when I make it 1,800, it looks like he still has folding equity because it looks like I can be bluffing. If I made it like 3,800 or something on the re-raise,
and committed yourself
with nothing behind,
right?
Then it's kind of obvious I have a good hand, and there's no point in doing that. If he just shuts out all of his bluffs, and I get it in against his monster hands, but I would have gotten it in against them no matter what I did.
Yeah, right.
Basically, when it comes down to these decisions, where you can take a part of their range, where it doesn't matter what you do against them, then you kind of just like take that out of the hat and throw it away, and then all you have to deal with is how you play against the rest of his range, and what's the best way to maximize against that part of his range.
Okay, perfect. And so the end result of the hand was you guys got it all in on that flop there, and the turn and river were blanks, and you took it down. So a tidy, close to $10,000 pot. So
yeah, it's pretty big pot for 10-20.